Today I want to talk about having the right perspective. I heard a story once about two friends in a foxhole. During an intense battle, all their comrades had died, but somehow these two made it out alive. When they returned home after war, one of them went into a deep depression and could barely manage life. He'd say, "Everyone's gonna die, so what's the point of living?" The other went on to live a full and successful life. When thinking back on his time in war, he said, "I learned that life is so short, you need to make the most of it." It's easy to focus on what's wrong in life, to focus on what we don't have and how big our obstacles are. But if we're not careful, it'll cause us to lose sight of all the good things God has done. We'll start taking things for granted, like our family, our friends, our health, or the opportunities God has already blessed us with, including the ability to live a free and full, abundant life. So what was the difference between these two friends? Simple: perspective. One focused on what was right, the other focused on what was wrong. You can take two people and put them in the same exact circumstances. One will be negative, always complaining, just enduring life. The other will be happy and grateful, enjoying life. What's the difference? Their perspective. It's in how they're choosing to see the situation. Your life is going to follow your thoughts. That's why you've got to get your mind going in the right direction. The wrong direction would be to focus on our obstacles, maybe our addictions or the areas of lack in our lives. Instead, our attitude should be, "I know God is still on the throne. He's in complete control of my life. He said His plans for me are good and not evil. I'm not going to drag through this day defeated, complaining, focused on what's wrong. No, I'm going to change my perspective and thank God I'm alive and that I have opportunity to be free from anything that's holding me." You see, if you're constantly meditating on God's goodness, thinking about what He's done for you, and talking about how He's blessed you, then you're going to see God's favor in amazing ways. In fact, the scripture tells us this is the right direction for our minds to go in. In Philippians 4:8, Paul says, "Brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." We have to keep our minds on the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, focused on the things to praise, not things to curse. Paul knew that if your mind was going in the right direction of God's goodness, then God can move your life in miraculous ways. Friends, there will always be something bad, and there's always going to be something good in every situation, but it's up to you to choose what your perspective will be. Here's a key: if we complain about where we are, we'll never get to where we want to be. And you might be thinking, "You know what, Jay, I drive this old, dirty, beat-up car that doesn't have any AC. If you were burning up in this Houston heat, you'd complain too." But remember this phrase: if you complain, you'll remain. But if you praise, you'll be raised. When you meditate on the goodness of God, it not only helps you have the right perspective, but your faith is being released. And when your faith is released, it activates the power to the Most High God. I believe the best perspective to have in life and in all things is gratitude. We all have things in our lives that can steal our joy and cause us to be bitter. But if we're going to live a happy life, the foundation is having a grateful spirit. I've learned seeds of discouragement can't take root in a grateful heart. If you're not happy today or you're struggling in an area of your life, one of the quickest ways to see that turnaround is to start being more grateful. Instead of looking at what's wrong, start thanking God for what's right. Instead of complaining about what you don't have, start thanking God for what you do have. Instead of dwelling on how far you have to go, look back and thank God for how far He's already brought you. Thessalonians 5:18 says, "In everything give thanks." It doesn't say to give thanks for everything. It says to give thanks in everything. In other words, we don't thank God for the trouble. We thank Him that we're coming out of that trouble. We thank Him because we know the hard times won't last. In the difficulty, we thank Him that He's turning it around for our good. Anytime you have an opportunity to complain, let that be a reminder to give God praise. Just turn it around and thank Him because He's working in your life. I've talked to people that have gone through disappointments. They don't think they have any reason to be grateful. But really, it's all a matter of perspective. When we go through a disappointment, the wrong perspective is, "I should have known that was going to happen. I never get any good breaks. Just my luck." But the right perspective is, when one door closes, I know God's going to open another. What was meant for harm, I know God will use for my advantage. I read a story recently about a man who started having problems with his eyes. He was always very strong, healthy, he was active, he was a good ball player, but his eye troubles persisted, so he finally went to see a doctor. After many tests, he was told he had cancer in his eye and that he'd have to have an operation. It looked like he was going to lose vision, and he became very distraught. But during the operation, the doctors were surprised to find that it wasn't cancer after all. It was an unusual fungus which they were able to remove to save his vision. When he woke up from the operation and got the good news, he said, "That was the greatest day of my life." Think about that. He didn't win the lottery. He didn't buy a new house. He didn't get a promotion. He simply got the news that he was able to see. He said, now every morning I get up and look at things on purpose. I stare at my children. I stare at my wife. I'll go out and look at trees. I'll pick up an acorn and just stare at it. Why? Because he almost lost his vision. Now being able to see has taken on a totally different perspective. Every day we'll be tempted to complain and take for granted the good things God has already blessed us with. If you can see, if you can talk, if you can walk, if you have friends, family, and opportunity, learn to appreciate that. Don't go around complaining about what's wrong. Change your focus. Staying in an attitude of gratitude for all God has done is a key to living free. That's why David said in Psalm 34, I will bless the Lord at all times. I will constantly speak his praises. Notice how long? Constantly, all the time. David knew a secret. You can't praise and complain at the same time. If you're constantly thanking God for his goodness, meditating on what he's done, thinking about how he's blessed you, then you won't have any time to go around complaining about what's wrong, and that's when God can take you to new heights. Friends, my prayer for each of us is that we'll go out with the right perspective, focused on the good, not taking things for granted, recognizing that every day is unique and irreplaceable. One thing I found that'll help keep the right perspective is to make a list of all the things you have to be grateful for. Take a few minutes and write down at least a dozen things God has blessed you with. This week, I want to leave you with a little homework. Take your gratitude list and review it with God every day. Tell him how grateful you are for all these things. So that you don't forget, put it up on the mirror in your bathroom. Every day before you leave the house, go over it 2 or 3 times. Before you go to bed, do the same thing. Get that down in your spirit and meditate on the good things God has done.